Vandeham Shri Guru.
So generally what we do is we chant in a call and response manner the Hare Krishna mantra. This is to help bring our minds from all the different things that it was involved in during the day. In the day-to-day stuff like trying to find a job, trying to solve a quarrel or disagreement, or trying to win over an argument, or something was bothering us, wherever the mind was or is. Idea is to bring it to a point of, we call it transcendence, or a spiritual center. And that's the mantra. There are 3 words, Hare, Krishna and Rama, and they're organized in 16 word format. And the word Hare is a call to the divine energy that attracts us to, that makes spiritual life or spirituality attractive. And Krishna is Krishna is literally in Sanskrit it means the all attractive person. And Rama means the reservoir of all pleasure. Now, there are many persons in this world who are attractive. They're attractive because of their good looks or beauty. They're attractive because of their money. They may not have good looks, but their money is definitely attractive. They're very attractive, or strength, or knowledge. Someone who has knowledge is attractive. They may not have any money. They may not have any bodily beauty. Still, they're attractive, etc. So there are 6 such factors that say by which a person becomes attractive, or a person is attractive. But all those qualities within ordinary human beings, or any even extraordinary human beings, is temporary. They have knowledge for some time and either they forget. They have beauty for some time and they forget, or the beauty goes away. But to have all these qualities, 6 of them, all beauty, all knowledge, all fame, all strength, all renunciation, and all power. All these 6, to have them in infinite quantities, simultaneously. If there's someone like that, that person is called Krishna, or the most attractive. And Rama is pleasure, the source of all pleasure. So just as there is fire, and we know it's fire by what? There are some characteristics to fire, correct? The 2 characteristics are
Heat
and
light.
So when we walk, or when we move closer to fire, we experience heat. And the farther we move away from fire, we don't experience that heat, or it reduces. Similarly, when we say Rama, that means we're moving closer to the source of all pleasure, and so we experience pleasure. That's what we're looking for, any one of us. Every living entity. When I was parking my car, I saw a raccoon walking. I thought he's also coming for the program. Even the raccoon is looking for something to eat, or something for pleasure. And only few people do anything that is for pain. Most everyone does anything they do for pleasure. So by chanting this mantra, we call upon that energy that attracts us to the most attractive person, Krishna, is also the reservoir of all pleasure. That way the mind, which is actually agitated, looking for pleasure elsewhere is brought to the source of all pleasure. Now why by the mantra? Because there are many sounds in this world. They are called material sounds. There's a distinction between sound that is material and sound that is non-material or spiritual. There's a distinction. The distinction is that material sound is different from the object that it signifies. So for example, I'm thirsty and I say water, water, water. I get more thirsty. But it doesn't quench my thirst, because the sound water and the object water are distinct. They're not the same. However, in the spiritual dimension, because it's the absolute dimension, the sound and the object are the same. So if I say Krishna or Rama, within the sound is the object or the person. This is the fundamental difference between anything material and spiritual. Spiritual is absolute, material is relative. And we operate in the relative realm, and the idea is to, through the practice of yoga, to connect with. That's what the word yoga means in Sanskrit, to connect with. So our idea is to bring our consciousness from the relative realm to connect it on an absolute realm. And a person who can do that or does that progressively is called a yogi, or practices that to bring perfection. Why do we have to practice anything? Stephanie, why do we practice it? Samantha, why do we practice it? I'm having a real bad time with names today.
To get better.
Huh?
To get better.
To get better. Very good. And it is also to move from what we are used to doing to create another habit. Anything where we want to create a habit, we have to practice at it. The more we practice at it, it becomes our habit, our nature, second nature. So our minds are very much attracted to or focused in the relative realm. We need practice to bring it to the absolute realm or the spiritual realm. So we'll spend a few minutes in chanting this mantra, and then we'll have some conversation. Okay, so we'll sing a very simple tune, that way you can all join in. So I will sing the mantra and then you will respond. Okay? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna Well, thank you for joining me. I was going to speak on a particular topic. Is there a particular topic you would like to hear about? Any burning question on your mind? Questions from current issues or anything? Okay, then I'll speak on something. The realm of spirituality is so broad that you could talk on varieties of subjects, and you could talk for a very, very long time. So narrowing it down to something very topical is helpful as we're just meeting. Some of you are meeting for the first time, and some of you I've known for a few years now, too. And some I've known much longer. I'll talk about setting priorities. Now in life, in general, we set priorities. Hopefully we are. There are some priorities that are set upon us. They are called
Obligation?
emergencies.
No.
Emergencies. There's a fire in the building.
Okay.
Those examples we usually have. Whatever, there's a leak in the plumbing, the toilet's choked, or there's a fire in the building, or our relative is in the hospital. Then all other priorities take a back seat, and that priority takes precedence. It's called emergency. Otherwise, in general, the time management gurus, they ask us to map whatever we want to accomplish into 4 quadrants. The 2 axes that make the 4 quadrants are important or importance axis and urgent axis, urgency. So from your side, usually the first quadrant, that's the top right quadrant, are activities or things that are important and urgent. There's a fire, something, our driver's license has expired. For some people that's not really important or urgent, but it is. So the second quadrant is things that are important but not urgent. The third quadrant are things that are not urgent and not important. and the fourth quadrant, the things that are urgent
Not enough.
but not important. Where do you think people mostly operate? Which quadrant do people operate in? Please.
Well, during the summertime.
Not
Not important. I'm
There's
not.
I realized that there is a whole time dimension to it. Good one.
I feel like most people probably operate in the unimportant, not urgent
Yeah,
side.
not important, not urgent. And those are called time wasters. Because they're not important, they're not urgent. But most people, or a lot of people, operate in that quadrant. It's a time waster. Another quadrant that people operate in is the urgent, urgent but not important. Why? Because we have a very good quality called procrastination. And things become urgent, and urgent, even if they're not important and urgent. We give it importance, although they're not. Or it certainly takes on a life of importance, although it may not be, like paying a bill. I mean, it's one way you can say it's important. It's important to pay bills, by the way. It is. But in the sense of not important, that's not our life. Our life is not meant for paying bills. So when we don't pay them, they bring us into that, and that's where people operate. So that's another quadrant that people, just the nature of being in Chicago or being in these modern times, whatever, is the first quadrant. Things that are important and urgent. And that is the area, that quadrant is where most stress is. Because people generally don't plan themselves. They don't create priorities properly. They don't define priorities properly. So things that are, when I do this, you have to imagine a quadrant. Things that are important but not urgent, when they're not prioritized properly, they move to the urgent, they move on the urgent dimension. And that's where stress happens. So those who are planners or visionaries or people who don't like stress, anyone here not like stress? We don't like stress, but somehow it's part of our being for some reason. Stress. We'll talk about the joys of being stressful, but we'll come to that later. But when things are not planned properly, or not visualized, not expected, priorities are not set correctly, then rather than operating in a field of, or a realm of plan, vision, organized, so no stress, things move to this side. So the difference between a person who has the right priorities, not only has the right priorities, but also has prioritized things rightly, operates in this quadrant. And therefore they're not stressful. They're actually happy or calm. People operate in this quadrant, a lot can be said about that. And that's usually the universe, the population of the world is sitting there, most likely, most all. There are few persons here. So you can tell me what are the joys of having stress. Some people actually like stress. Can you imagine that? They think that,
Homework gets done.
Yeah, I know. It's in there. It still doesn't. How it gets done, what all happens, the amount of curse words that we throw out into the atmosphere. But what happens when there is stress? What are some, come on, help me out.
Loss of sleep. Appetite.
Loss of appetite. For some people, appetite actually grows. I'll talk about comfort food, how it is a friend of stressed person. But yeah,
Loss of sleep.
Anger, frustration. You two ladies are always calm. You've never had stress. So you have something to add? Have you been stressed ever?
Yes.
So what happens when you're stressed?
I procrastinate actually.
It's too big to deal with it. It's described by the psychologists that when the parasympathetic nervous system is agitated, it's called stress. There are only two responses. One is called fight, the other is called flight. Flight is usually the friend of most persons. They don't want to deal with it. There's some persons who jump right in. Regardless, they're stressed. Whether you jump right into it or you run away from it, you're stressed. Or one is stressed. What else happens from stress? Adela? Since you don't know, you operate in this quadrant. Can you stretch your imagination to what happens?
I work very well on this class. I feel like things get done, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Especially close to deadlines. Everything gets done. It's like 99% efficiency.
So he prioritizes everything close to deadlines.
We used to call that rocket principle. Only when the backside is on fire does this thing.
Are there two stages? Something falls off before you're put in orbit?
No, work quality falls off.
Huh?
Work quality falls off.
That's the first stage. So the time management gurus urge people or implore or request that people move from first quadrant to second. And in second quadrant, the idea is that when you work in an urgency mode, one of the things that otherwise which is an asset that we don't have to avail of is time. Time is an asset that moves almost imperceptibly, but it's an asset that we have. But when we operate in the first quadrant, the lack of or the sense of not having time actually makes things more difficult. It doesn't give us time to, we have to rely on off-the-cuff solutions. Well, most of us know, and some of us have yet to realize, that thought-out actions are more powerful and meaningful than off-the-cuff responses. Okay, you know why? Why is a thought-out response to a circumstance better than an off-the-cuff?
Because you usually have a backup plan.
Okay, that's nice.
Because you can think of every option possible. You have the time to do
You
that.
can or cannot? You can think of options. That's
Like,
you can.
thoroughly study the limitations, pros, cons, everything.
Very nice. Good.
It's planned. It's planned.
It's planned.
Because it's thought out.
Yeah.
Aware of the consequences.
You can be better aware of consequences, like Harshinder was saying. If you thought of options, you would think about in this option that will be the outcome perhaps, and this option this may be the outcome. Now you have time to consider what is the most favorable option to take. Another issue with off-the-cuff responses to circumstances is in that circumstance when the stress is high or the situation demands an immediate response, according to now we're moving to spiritual teachings, there are three things called the modes of nature that are acting. Modes of nature are those imperceptible laws of material nature, just by being in this world, that push us to doing and saying things in a way as a response to circumstances. Right? Have you noticed that no two people respond similarly to any circumstance? Correct? And why? They may be two siblings in the same family. They grew up in the same, our statistic guru, they grew in the same environment, nothing is different, same family, same everything, everything is same, but their response to circumstance is different. Because it depends on their what we call psychophysical nature, which is driven by the modes of nature. Primarily there are three, what we call goodness, passion, and ignorance. Simply put, the best way to recognize these three is like this. A person who's influenced by the mode of ignorance does things that are harmful to himself or herself or are harmful to others. It's characterized by things that are destructive. We'll give examples. A person who is influenced by the mode of passion can only think about himself or herself. What is selfish? Like, what is in it for me? What's the best I can do for myself in this situation? And a person who's in the mode of goodness will think about how it will benefit. Whatever is my response, what impact will it have on others? So, which do you think is the best among the three? Goodness. Because it makes us socially, morally, ethically more responsible. Because we are considering how my speech and actions have an impact on others. So mode of goodness is better. Mode of passion, at least we're thinking about ourselves, which is the default position. And mode of ignorance. So for example, in the mode of ignorance, when someone is in a crisis situation or some situation, let's say there is disagreement between two people and they have to immediately say something to respond to that situation. The mode of ignorance person may kick the wall, throw away. You ever met persons like that? I know someone who got very angry and threw the phone away. And the phone broke. It was destructive. It hurt someone or it slapped someone, kicked the wall. Or worse yet, I don't want to deal with it, just go to sleep. In the mode of passion, the person is very quickly thinking, how can I get the maximum benefit for myself in this situation? They don't consider what happens to others, whether others are pain or at a loss or suffering, it doesn't matter. I'm the most important in this situation, I need the best. Now sometimes mode of passion is necessary. For example, if a vendor or someone is cheating us of our money, right? Then we do say, hey, we do make sure that our situation is more important than that person's. However, those who are in the mode of goodness, even in that situation, will think about the other person's benefit as well. It may not be so much financially their benefit, but in the interaction, is the interaction pleasing? Is it in a way that I don't leave a scar in someone else's mind about how I've spoken? It is described in one of our books of knowledge that there are two ways to hurt a person. I mean, they don't describe how to hurt a person. It's described how the nature of people in this world is. You physically harm someone, and then you can say sorry, you can apply some cream or ointment or medication, and that wound will heal. Another way is to speak in a way that's very hurtful. And the problem with that is there is no place to apply any medication, but the hurt is very deep because of harsh speech. That wound hurts more than a physical wound. And we issue speech very easily, especially harsh speech. Very easily it comes out like that. So, to operate in the important, not urgent realm requires a little thoughtfulness and using the asset of time properly. So planned. Now there are certain things that will be emergency. That we cannot do about. No one can say, oh, in my life there will not be a fire, there will not be a plumbing problem, no friend or relative will go to the hospital. Even if they do, it's not urgent for me. You cannot operate. It's just not possible. So there are some things that will be there. Mostly if you operate here, then it's described that you put, I think Stephen Covey said something like, I don't know exactly, so I might not quote him, paraphrasing, that if you're given a jar and you're given big stones, small stones, and some sand, what's the order in which you'll put them in? He recommends, others recommend, you put the big stones first, you put the small stones next, and then you put the sand, because sand will find its places. If you pour sand first, and then the small stones, and then the big stones might not fit. The sand takes away the limited capacity. Now this discussion doesn't apply to any one of you who has unlimited capacity. This applies to those of us who perhaps don't have unlimited capacity. So the putting the big rocks or the big stones first in is important. So this is so far in just day-to-day life. However, those who are spiritualists or yogis like our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada, they bring in a whole different dimension about priority. That there are certain things that are important, career, economic independence, or affluence, or at least money to pay our bills. That's something, or getting the job, getting our project out there, whatever you want. Those might be important, and they are. However, there is a whole dimension of priority if we know who we are. For example, for each one of us, the big stones, the small stones, and sand depend upon our sense of identity. Like, who do we think we are? So, for example, if I think of myself as a student, then for me, my big stones are whatever, get my coursework done, get my homework done, and by the way, party on Fridays if I can. When I was in college, for me, my big stone was first get the party in place. And the sand was the homework, yeah, whatever. If we get time, we'll take care of it. We used to party from Thursday, we were very nice. We used to party from Thursday night through Sunday night. And Monday and Tuesday went in recovery. and Wednesday was perhaps a day we would get some work done. I went through 2 master's degrees like that. And that's actually an improvement because in my bachelor's, I didn't even have the Wednesday. I was a very fascinating student. My college life was very amazing. And interestingly enough, I was adjudged the best student of in my master's degree class, and I'm still trying to figure out how that happened.
I don't want to know what the
father's kid.
I'm going to tell you. So depending on our sense of identity, for a parent or for let's say a professional who has a job or something, then their set of priorities will be according to their identity. You take a soldier, their set of priorities are different. You take a mother or a parent, their priorities are different. You take somebody who has a terminal illness, and they only have big rocks and everything has to go in first. Like that. So our sense of identity defines our priorities. But the Bhagavad Gita, which we commonly refer to, and it's sitting on the countertop there, describes that the first order of business is to know our identity. Our identity is that we are spiritual beings. And these spiritual beings, all of us, and all those beings that we cannot see, they're also here today. Little insects, or the raccoon who I think had a wrong address and didn't show up. Whoever. They're all spiritual beings residing in different bodies. Male, female, from this country or that country, like this species, whatever that species, raccoon, or birds, and trees. They're all spiritual beings, just residing in different bodies. And the common mistake, if you will, is because of the residents, we think of ourselves as the residents instead of who we are. For example, if I drive a Toyota, I'm residing in the Toyota, in the car. Someone asks me, who are you? I'm Toyota Camry. See, we're laughing. Because it brings about a chuckle. But that's what we do anyway. Someone says, oh, I'm Ford. But there are some persons who do say, I'm Ford.
No.
Or I am whatever, I'm Lexus. Like that. But just because we are in the vehicle or residence doesn't make us the residents. We're still distinct from it. True? Now, it may be easier to understand from an automobile example, but the spiritual beings sitting in this residence, the body, we can't make that distinction. In fact, that knowledge that we are distinct from this body is not accessible to us until we meet a spiritualist who will tell us that. And once we know our identity, or at least that's a viable option to consider, then the first question was, well, if I'm a spiritual being, what are my priorities? I need to re-examine the way I've understood my priorities today. So the Bhagavad Gita takes us through a very exciting journey, and I'm not going to take you through the whole thing right now. But this is just to give us a sense of appreciation of what the Bhagavad Gita talks about. It takes us through a very exciting adventure. The adventure of finding ourselves. Because that's the first step. If we don't know who we are, like a soldier, as soon as they put on their uniform, the beret or whatever they put on their arms, and they think like a soldier. They speak like a soldier. They may be going out of home and their wife will ask, honey, what time would you get back? 1700 hours. Or, oh, I can't find the car. Where have you parked the car? 2 o'clock. Cars at 2 o'clock. But they don't speak like that at home, right? Hopefully not. But once the uniform is on, then they think like a soldier, they speak like a soldier. But if that's what they do every day in and day out, even when they're in their pajamas as well, because the sense of identity is not clear or mistaken. So the Bhagavad Gita says that we have also mistaken our identity into thinking I am Indian or I'm American or I'm a man or I'm a woman, I'm intelligent, I'm a doctor or most of you are engineers or whoever we are, like that. And because of that sense of identity, we think like, we act like, we speak like that identity. And because we are operating like that, what happens is, as life moves, everything seems to fall into the urgent category because we haven't put the right priorities. If the right priority is that I want to find out who I am first off before anything else, then I will know what's my priority. If I don't know who I am, then I will pick a wrong priority, or I will pick sand first thinking that's important. Or I might even pick a big stone first, but that stone may not be necessary at all. If my identity changes, my priorities change. So there's a story of a great king who had that sense of priority. Although he was king, in fact he was the emperor of a very, very vast kingdom. And I'll tell you the story. It's a very interesting story. He was a king who was also a yogi, whose senses were fully controlled. Like he wouldn't speak something that was not necessary. He wouldn't feel the pangs of hunger or thirst, like a perfected yogi, not a practicing, a perfected yogi. Never had the problem with hunger or thirst. Mind was completely balanced. He could think clearly. He served all his subjects very, very nicely. And above all, was a very, very great spiritualist. So one day, he was traveling through a forest. And he happened to come to a hermitage. And in the hermitage was a sage who was sitting in meditation. So normally, the kings are to be received properly by everyone. But the sage was in such deep meditation, he had not known that somebody had come because he was in a state of trance. So his external consciousness wasn't operating. So the king waited. And just so happened that that particular day, the king was very thirsty. And it's described that he almost became uncontrollably thirsty. And he waited and the sage is not responding. The hermit was not responding to get up and receive. In our culture, the best way to receive a guest is to first invite them with pleasing words. Offer them a place to sit. And if nothing else, the first thing to bring is some water to drink. And it's described that anyone who comes, they must be offered something to eat. And while they're eating, you never pose difficult questions. Always pose questions that are pleasing and simple. That's the way to. That's the way of hospitality in the Vedic culture. And he was not responding at all. He was sitting in meditation. So he got very angry, which is uncharacteristic. Being uncontrollably thirsty and becoming angry is uncharacteristic of the king. But what he did is, with his bow, he picked up a dead snake that was lying there, and he wrapped it around the sage's neck and insulted him, saying, "Ha! You're sitting there, so dull that you don't know how to take care of someone who's come to your door, especially the king and the emperor. You don't know how to. Your hospitality is like Motel 6. He didn't say that. And he left. When the hermit came back to his external consciousness and saw this dead snake around his neck, by his yogic power, he knew what has happened, what had transpired. But he didn't take it as an offense, or he didn't take it to heart as all. His young son, who was maybe about 12 years old, he walked in and he saw this, and he became very upset. Who does the king think he is? My father is a great sage, and sages are higher in social order, they are higher than the administrators. And this king is so arrogant, how dare he do something like this? So he recited some mantras and cursed that the king should die in 7 days. That's it. The emperor should die in 7 days. So I'm hoping that in the background you're thinking about which quadrant the little guy was operating in. He had to respond to that situation immediately right now. But his father, the sage, he was here. He was like, what have you done? It's all right. It was something that the king did. You shouldn't take it too seriously. It's all right. Just why did you speak something like that? And in the previous ages, the words of the sages were very, very powerful. They would say something and it would happen. Nowadays we say something and it absolutely does not happen. In fact, we're thankful that it doesn't happen nowadays because the kinds of things we say. But the father knew that just because the son had cursed like that it will happen. He said, no, this land needs the king, and he's a very, very generous and loving king, very compassionate. It may have been something. The word reached the king that you've been cursed to die in 7 days. And the king's response was, so be it. If that's what it is, that is what it is. So be it. Now, the so be it means the king himself is spiritually very advanced, elevated. But he understands if providence is working that way, then so be it. And he decided that rather than be a king anymore or an emperor, I have certain priorities. And so he passed on his kingdom to his son, and he relinquished all his royal attire, and he went to the banks of the sacred river, the Ganges. You heard the word Ganges, right, in India? He went and sat on the banks of the Ganges, saying that for the next 7 days, I will just sit here and I will do what is priority for me. I'll explain what he did. Now all the other learned members of his assembly kingdom, they all got together. And they asked him, oh my dear king, what would you do? He said, I'm going to sit here for the next 7 days, fasting. I will not eat anything. I will not sleep. I only have limited time, 7 days. And I want to make the best use of it. Now you know, in general, when you tell a person or when a person comes to know that they have a terminal illness and they've been given so much time, what happens to them? Do you know? Have you met any person like that? What happens to them?
They have, like, whatever I've seen is they become like very sad and denial for some time, and then all of a sudden they want to do everything, like, you know, they want to meet everybody, all their dear near ones, and do what they want, eat what they want, like, you know, whatever they whimsically can think of, they try to do that for a few days, and then again they go into denial, and you know, it's
Generally they have an epiphany something that the light turns on. There was a rock star, I forget his name, and he led a rock star lifestyle. Drugs, sex, just the whole lifestyle, rock and roll lifestyle. He was told, you have a terminal illness and you have exactly 6 months. That's it. For him, the epiphany was he became spiritual. Whoa, hold on a second. If all that I have done so far, drugs and sex and completely uncontrolled life, whatever I wanted to do, I did. If that has brought about this, if something that I've been doing is not correct, let me look at what's the right thing for me to do. He had that epiphany. Generally, when you tell people you have limited time, they have an epiphany. Whatever the variety of epiphany they may have, I must have Cheesecake Factory's cheesecake before I die. I enroll in the Make-A-Wish Foundation or something. So that epiphany, the king was, I need to figure out who I really am. And what is my first order of business. So he asked a bunch of people who were there, all greatly learned persons, and they had different opinions. At that time, a young man walked into the assembly. And interestingly, that he was 16 years old or so. Very, very attractive bodily features, muscular, broad chest, narrow waist, long curly locks of hair. He was walking naked. And behind him were a bunch of children who had sticks in their hand, little stones, and they were heckling. Because people don't walk like that naked. But he was walking all the time. And when he came into their assembly, all the greatly learned persons, they stood up in awe and respect for him. And so the little children who were following were like, whoa, who's this guy? They turned around and went away. The reason he was not wearing any clothes is described that because his sense of identification with himself was, I am not this body. So whether he wore clothes or not didn't matter to him. Because he was not identifying himself with the body. He had realized himself spiritually so thoroughly that putting on clothes or not didn't make any difference. We will not find such persons generally. This is a very, very, very rare and advanced spiritual consciousness. Most other spiritualists will put on clothes. But he was on you were talking of outliers, and he was already outlier, like severely outlier. He cannot be put into any set of consideration. And when he arrived, this king said, you are the right person to tell me who I am, and what's my first order of business. He said, oh sure, I will do so. So he sat down, and the king sat with him, and they had this conversation. And the king asks a very, very nice question. Generally, if someone would ask, what should I do? What should I do now? The king didn't ask that. The king asked a two-part question. Essentially, the question was, for a person who is facing death, what is the most important thing to do? And it's described that he asked it not just for himself, but he was asking for the benefit of all humanity. Because he's a king. He had so much compassion on everybody else. Remember when he said the person in the mode of goodness, even in the emergency circumstance will think about benefiting others. So he asked the question, what is the right thing? What is the person to do when they're facing death? And this young man, he speaks that the most important priority is to know one's own identity and to connect with the absolute truth. That means in that moment, in that limited time, the first order of business priority is a spiritual one, not a material one. Any material priority will not meet or satisfy the question, unless the priority is a spiritual one, and that is to connect with the absolute truth, the source. And death is a event, right? An event that causes stress, anxiety, sadness, pain for oneself and for others. I had once at some other speaking engagement, I had expressed that everyone is afraid of death. So someone challenged me, I am not afraid of death. I said, really? Yeah, I'm not afraid of death at all. I could die any minute and it wouldn't matter to me. I said, you may not be afraid of your death, but if a near one, a relative or someone who's very dear to you, if they're facing death, would you say the same? I don't care, they can die any moment. I said, no, I can't say the same about that. I said, then everyone is afraid of death. Afraid because death is such an event that brings an abrupt end to whatever we are doing, whatever we are aspiring for, whatever we are. And what is ending, according to Bhagavad Gita, what is ending is the residence. Nothing happens to the spiritual living entity. Nothing happens. For example, I won't say this apartment, but any apartment that we are living in, if someone comes and breaks all the walls down, what happens to us? We move into another place. We don't get hurt physically, we're not harmed. The residents don't get harmed, the residence is broken down. Then the residents will move to another residence. True? Or even closer is whatever shirt or clothes we're wearing and there's a tear in it. We take it off and put on something else and move on as if nothing happened. Unless it's a very expensive thing and our whole absorption. So similarly, the soul which is residing in this body, the spiritual being that's residing in the body, when the body is finished, moves on to another body. I'm just leading into the theory of transmigration or reincarnation. I'm not going to talk about it today. So the Bhagavad Gita says, we move on to another thing. But whatever this body was doing comes to an abrupt halt. So as long as a person is still thinking, I am this body, for them everything ends painfully. One who realizes I am a spiritual living entity, oh, this body is gone, I'm moving to the next body. Such a person is no stress, no pain, no suffering, peacefully move to the next situation. So that is the consciousness of a spiritualist. And if that consciousness can be developed, that's first order of priority. So I'll pause here. Any comments or questions? Some things make sense, some things don't. Yeah.
I have a question. So what happens if someone has never become conscious of their spirituality?
Right.
What happens to them?
What happens is, then they also move from one form of body to another form of body. because death happens for everyone. Right? Now, what's the set of criteria that decides what that next destination will be is what we call popularly karma. So according to one's karma, another way we can think of it as qualification. According to one's qualification, one will get the next destination. For example, let's take the frequent flyer system. If I have traveled enough, then I get qualified for an upgrade. Right? If I haven't traveled enough, even if I say, hey, why is that guy going? Well, he's qualified. You're not. So there are certain points that we need to accumulate before we can get upgraded. Similarly, in one's life, whatever we do, the theory of karma says, whatever I do, it is recorded as an activity and it has a particular reaction to it. And what I do is driven by what I think. Right? If I think of, I don't think like this, but if I think of punching a venom, and I act it out, and in that there is a reaction to it, because within the world that we live in, it is governed by certain laws, and the laws of karma state that when you act in a particular way, there is a reaction that comes to you. For example, fire. If I put my hand in fire, it says it will burn. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be the President of the United States. You put your hand in fire, it will burn. Fire doesn't distinguish. Well, this is a little child, I will not burn. This is the President of the United States, I am afraid of burning. There's nothing like that. Fire is, because the laws are governed, that's the law. That's the law by which fire operates. It has heat. So there are certain laws that operate in this world that we are living in, and most of us, we're not even aware of it. We can't become aware of every law. So what happens is, there are certain principles that help us tread through those laws. Principles of morality, ethics, they help us tread through those laws in a comfortable way. That's why society needs, a social body needs morality as a framework to traverse through life without too much of karmic reactions. But to answer your question, simple, a person or everyone moves from one situation to another. Only the spiritualists, they move out of a body, no more material body. That's the goal. That the spiritual beings that we are, that our spiritual nature is fully manifest. Right now our spiritual nature is not manifest. It is dormant. And we would like, as aspiring spiritualists, we would like our spiritual nature fully manifest. The other side of it is, the flip side is, that the spiritual nature is completely dormant and we are being led by the laws of karma from one situation to another, from one situation to another, perpetually. Does that address your question? But the whole theory of karma is a very exciting topic, which I hope to, bring up for discussion soon, whenever I come back. If it happens next Thursday, we'll do it next Thursday or sometime. So.
How about animals?
How about animals? Animals also move from one stage to another stage.
But they are incapable of attaining consciousness.
That is correct. They are incapable. So it's described that the human being, the human life, because the sense of rationality and cognitive ability are fully manifest. So from the humans, according to law of karma, depending on the desires and activities, decides the next life form. And whatever life form that spiritual being enters, from there on there's a progression back to the human life. Because the animals, they are not collecting karma, they are only expending their previous karma. Because the faculty of choice is not so strong in an animal, for example. Like when a tiger is hungry, it will not forgive or excuse the deer. What's about today? It's driven by instinct.
So transmigration happens from human to animal.
Transmigration
Not from
happens
human
from
to
one species to another
Other
species.
species. It's not
Because the living entity who's in the tiger's body will migrate up back to the human form. And from the human form can become fully spiritually, what we say, liberated, emancipated, or back into some other living entity according to one's desire. Something's burning in the kitchen.
No, it's fine.
So much discussion about fire and heat. Anything else? Okay. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have dinner for everyone,
Yes.
right? Well, dinner, and then we can have more casual conversation during dinner if you like. But thank you both for joining us, especially, and nice to see you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.